Again, the $100 million was in a separate bill, so it is not reflected in any of these amounts. That's actually a cash, not a CIP amount as well. So those will be handled in a fully separate bucket and monitored as we go through those projects, but not reflected in any of these sheets. Any questions?
Right.
Thank you for the report. I do think that this past legislative session, the governor had requested and supported the department's request for $26 million. There was 16 million for waste student formula, 10 million in additional funds that would have gone to the schools via the waste student formula for ELL. And it's unfortunate that the legislature saw that the funding should be only for the waste student formula funds. Because true empowerment for the schools is providing the schools with sufficient resources to actually do the kind of programming that the students need for that particular school. I think the HSTA had their plan for legislative funding to increase funding for the schools. And I think for the next biennium, there needs to be a statewide community partnership effort to go to the legislature to fully fund what's necessary in order to increase the funding for the schools. And that is to increase waste student formula in excess of what was requested in the supplemental budget. Because until schools get the sufficient funds to do the kind of intensive interventions that are required to help our struggling students are going to continue to struggle. Particularly special education students where special education teachers do not have the support and resources that special education teachers continue to rely on service providers that are inconsistent in providing services to that population. So when you look at the overall scheme of things, about 1/3 of our students are struggling, and the achievement gap has not been reduced. So I say all that because after 5 years being on this board, the greatest frustration is that our legislative leaders are struggling to meet the different priorities of our state. And I understand that public education is not the only issue that they need to deal with. But if we're really going to address student achievement, it's clear that public education is not receiving the necessary support as compared to other states. And we need the public to know that in order to have quality schools, we're going to have to fund quality schools at an appropriate level, and we're not being funded right now. And that special education is a crisis, and that there are students that are struggling throughout our state. So having said that, the positive thing is that it doesn't seem to be, the number of provisos has in past years seems to have been reduced. So I think that's a positive thing. Now, whether or not, if we have shortfalls, we can manage transfer monies from one of the EDNs to another. We would never transfer EDN 100 monies. But perhaps if we had surplus monies for utilities for whatever reason, or surplus money in transportation, if we continue to have savings, at least perhaps some of those monies can be transferred for EDN 100. And I just offer that as a food for thought. But I thank you for the work that you do, and hopefully in future bienniums, the department can be funded at an appropriate level, and the teachers in the classroom can be supported. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Brian. Any other questions or comments? Max?
Thank you for the report. On attachment E, I'm just trying to get a better understanding again of how the report works. So you have fund symbols that say P, L, B, C, and E. I'm not sure what those symbols are because there's no key tied to the report that I can see. So maybe we can put those symbols in a key just so I can better understand that.
Yeah, I wish I knew what those were too, and I won't put our legislative staffers on the spot either today. But yeah, we'll make a key in the future for that.
Okay. And with respect to the lump sum CIP on the heat abatement, the G5.01, the 30 million, I'm trying to understand what that 30 million represents. Is it separate from the 100 million that was appropriated?
Okay, so that 30 million was actually part of the governor's budget request. And it was actually, it went through the budget cycle and it was both in the HD1 and in the SG1. But then it was removed from the conference draft because the funding came through the $100 million through the bill. So it was removed from here.
Okay. And then on the last one, on Campbell High, G80.02 on the new classroom buildings, if the ask was 35 million, we got 12 million, is what I understand. Then how much, what would that translate to in terms of being able to put classrooms together or expanding Campbell High's capacity?
I'm going to call Dan Carlson back up to specifically speak to that.
I'm going to cover a little bit of this in the next brief as well. But with that 12 million, we can still get on our way with the design, the planning, and some of the infrastructure work that we're going to need to do to get the site ready. Does it delay us? Yes, it's going to delay us probably a little bit because we have received the full 35 million. We probably wouldn't have been able to get into construction within the year. We've already done quite a bit of the some of the planning, the initial planning as far as layout and where it's going to go.
Does that reduce the capacity that you're going to be able to build?
We're still going to build the capacity, so again, with the anticipation that we get the funding next year
Okay.
for the rest of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Check.
So the main impact of that is a one-year delay.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Approximately. On the same subject, I know we're gonna have that presentation on Kapolei High School, but on the new Kapolei High School. But I don't know if the testimony is accurate that we received. It says that superintendent testified that Kapolei High School, a new high school in Kapolei would be the DOE's #1 priority. And yet, and then the discussion memo that you have talks about new buildings at Campbell and Kapolei, existing Kapolei High School. But the only item that's on this long list is the Campbell building. So I'm kind of wondering if the new school in Kapolei was a priority, why wasn't it asked for? And if the interim measure is to also increase existing Kapolei High School, why wasn't that asked for? I understand the legislature will do what it does, but I don't see it in the ask. So, just kind of curious, the two lists kind of don't match up.
Right, some of that comes through capacity, when we're asking for the low sum amount in capacity. There is a line item under N, the new secondary school in Kapolei, with a small amount attached to it, so there's 1,000. It's alphabetical, so it's under new. Yeah, new secondary school Kapolei, and it's $1,000. 3 zeros to all these numbers, but
57.
it's about 3/4 of the way down the page.
Okay.
So it is recognized that that is a need.
I was looking under alphabetical, so I was looking at Kapolei, so I couldn't find that, but still, it's only a token.
Yes, but it does recognize that there is a need, at least to begin that process.
Nice. Thank you.
Patricia.
Thank you for your presentation. So I just want to reiterate my colleagues' sentiments about the weighted student formula and the disappointment in the lack of funding for the 10 million specifically for our EL students. Just to point out again the needs of the schools, and I know that the Department of Ed recognizes that in this request, with having specialists in these areas. We hear families talking about how the need of translators and how they don't even ask for translators because they realize schools don't have the funds for that. And so just pointing out that if we do want to close this achievement gap, these resources are so important, so necessary. and that in future budget requests that you always keep this in mind in the next request. And I liked my colleagues' point about working with HSTA and working with partners in the communities to really advocate for these kinds of budget needs. So it's more of a comment, really, because I'm just disappointed.
Yes, thank you for that. We are giving everybody a little bit of break since legislative session has just ended, but we do plan to follow up with the money chairs and other key folks around that $10 million ELL request, just to gain some feedback and insight so that we can inform the Committee on Weights, which will be meeting next spring and summer. Because, the Committee on Weights is really our process to help justify and build the need and justify those amounts that we need for weighted student formula. So we hope to use that as part of our process to inform that count going forward.
I think another conversation to have too is whether to have it categorical, whether it's a win formula. I mean, revisiting that conversation again, if that would be a better route, working with the legislature, that is they know it goes to that. Although I do like the empowerment piece of schools deciding how to use the money to best meet the needs of these communities. But as you move forward, I appreciate that you are keeping this at the forefront.
Thank you.
Maybe just to piggyback on my colleagues as well, what can the board do to help with this effort? Because it is a concern. We all share. It shouldn't necessarily be just the DOE that has, I guess, a responsibility, but what does the board need to help with? If, you can't answer that now, we might want to put some thought into what support the board needs to provide as we communicate with the legislature.
Okay, we'll do that as we start planning the biennial budget cycle process.
Thank you. By the way, your reports have been really good, and it's a lot easier to understand than I think I've seen it even the past few months, so thank you for your efforts.
Yeah, thank you very much.
We don't actually need $10 million. We need $100 million for student achievement. Once we got $100 million for air conditioning, we need $100 million to improve public education to the point that we all can be proud of it. And what we need to do is we need to do what the governor has indicated needs to be done. Needs to go out into the community, meet with as many community people, have people understand how we're going to spend the money for intervention, how we're going to support teachers, and get everybody to buy in. Where when you go to the legislature, they're going to say, yeah, we want quality schools and we want the support in each and every community. Right now, we're not getting that, and I think it's because we're not getting out there. And I'm as guilty as anybody else in terms of not, explaining that we need to pay for the support that the teachers need. Anyway, but that's what it's going to take. It's going to take community efforts, PTA groups, so for everyone to understand we've got to pay in order to get the support that the principals really need. Everything translates green. Everything translates to money. And so anyway, so if we can get a printing press at the DOE, that would be a really good idea.
Any other questions or comments for you? If not, Dan's covered some of this already, but the final agenda item on the presentations is an update on the discussion as far as the high school and East Kapolei. So let Dan proceed.
Great. Thank you for this opportunity. The request was made a few months ago just to get an update on where we stand with the development of the new high school out in East Kapolei. Let me start by saying that DOE has been advocating and stands committed to fulfilling the needs of our growing communities in Heva and East Kapolei, as well as the rest of the state in different areas where we have growing populations. As we were just discussing, this lead season, our #1 priority and ask was for $35 million for a large multi-wing classroom building on Campbell. We're thankful for the $12 million we got, and again, we'll be able to execute to a certain point with that. And again, we're thankful for that. Out in that same area, though, just so it's on your radar, we have land and a complete design for a new middle school, which will be located almost kitty corner to the Kroc Center. And we're waiting again for the funding to build that. We continue to build out Eva McKine Middle. We have a third wing expansion in there, and we recently changed that from just a single-story structure to a two-story structure. So we plan on building out Eva McKine. So some may ask why we didn't plan for this population growth, particularly for the Campbell High area, and that's a fair question. It's a partially good news story here, and again, anecdotally, I've been told that there used to be a large number of people requesting geographic exceptions to go to schools other than Campbell. But in the last few years, we've seen a reduction in those requests to go to other schools, and they're actually going to Campbell. Hence the population increase a little bit. One other thing that has happened out there that some of our planners and the experts in this field were not necessarily predicting is we have a lot of multi-generational families that are establishing there and continue to, again, just add to the population. A lot of areas we obviously see basically a peak and then usually a decline as, again, those kids move on or out of the house. But Campbell is one of those areas, and Eva Plain area is just one of those areas where we're seeing that continued growth. So back to kind of the high school and where we're at. Around 2013 timeframe, we were given initial funding, about $1 million to start a project there for East Capitol High. We encumbered those funds, so we can still use them. We also then hired a consultant, PBR, to help with some research. They concluded over the last 5 years, Campbell High School has grown on an average of 82 students per year and is expected to continue to increase by 90 to 100 students per year for the next 5 years. Capitol High School had a peak enrollment, interestingly enough, of 2,341 in 2006, and then just this last year, they were a low of 2,024, so actually a reduction in their population over the last few years. But it is also predicted to grow during the next 5 years. In the memo that was attached there, there's enrollment projections for both Campbell and Capitol for what we currently have for this year compared to school year 2021. And really the overall population growth is around 500 expected in that time frame. Obviously a significant issue. The current area-wide enrollment projections show that once all residential development is complete, there would be a needed capacity for as many as 3,200 to 3,300 high school students. Again, this is a long-term, we're talking more than 10 years, 20 years or so, as that whole area builds out. So to address both the near-term and long-term needs, the DOE with PBR has identified current potential high school sites. And that's where I'd like to just turn your attention towards the map. We've got 4 different sites that are highlighted here. The first is a parcel on Fort Weaver Road. It's on the east side, labeled Gentry on your maps. We looked at that site. The issue with that is it's privately owned and would be difficult to acquire. One has paid obviously a hefty price for it, but the landowner is not interested in releasing that land to us. The other parcel is labeled ACBA. It's down near the Barbers Point Airport. The issues with that site is currently federally owned. Would require release of property to the state agency, and then land transfer is expected to would be required. And then obviously there's concerns over some soil remediation that might need to take place on that site. UH West Oahu is another option, state-owned. Currently the master plan, they do plan on building out a lot of their the land around that area. They have the edict that they have to basically fund themselves for UH West Oahu with development through private development around that area. In that area, they do and have plans for us to acquire a 12-acre elementary school site, but no plans for a high school. We just recently, as recent as this last month, the superintendent and I sat down with some of the folks from UH West Oahu. We're reopening that conversation and seeing if there's any way we could do potentially some kind of joint use type thing. It seems like it would be a win-win. And then the last site is the one labeled DLNR up to the north there. That's probably the one we've seen the most promise. It's state-owned. The issue with this property is just the topographical condition it's in. Got a stream going through it, fairly large ravine, and the improvements to actually be able to build that out, again, could cost up to probably $20 million just in just in site improvements. So in considering the challenges of each site and the current level of funding for new schools, the DOE has recently developed a near-term plan that we believe will work to mitigate the continued increase in student enrollment in this area until a new high school can be built. We've already talked about the situation with the Campbell building, and again, that's just an indication to us as far as how serious our legislators are taking the issue out there. So with that, we will again continue to ask for that. My funding will also be requested for the design and construction of a new classroom building at Capilate High. We have plenty of land on Capilate High. The ability to actually really build out Capilate High is certainly something we're going to pursue. So those two combined projects will provide capacity for an additional 700 students, allow us to focus on the best solution for a new high school for East Capilate. Future growth in East Capilate is inevitable. UH West Milwaukee, the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, and Ho'opili continue to develop. And this year, the governor actually released $5 million in January 2016 for design of the new East Capilate High School. So we do have some money ready to go. Go ahead and flip that over. So this is what I'd like to bring your attention to then. This is a DR Horton's proposed development of Ho'opili. And we have agreed, and they've agreed to, there's a number of the light blue sites there, all obviously schools, with the high school being north of Farrington Highway, and obviously like a 43-acre site there that they've, we've basically come to an agreement that we can have. There's still some subdivision type issues that we would need to do with the land, but the land should be readily available sometime in the near future. The biggest issue we've had with this site is the infrastructure. We have water and electric that comes in from the Alka side of this site. The biggest issue is sewer, which again is going to be developed by DR Horton, but it's going to actually come up from the Mackay side of the property. So we're trying to, again, we continue to have dialogue with them. The idea being here that if we were to build out Capilate High School, Campbell High School with facilities to solve the interim, it would make sense for us to build what we call a mega high school, just because we've never really built one that big, but it would be able to expand initially around 1,600 or so probably, but then have the ability to expand out to around 3,200 if we needed to. If you think about it, the other site, you kind of see a pink area right there. You know, if we were to go ahead and build a high school right now, that's looking like the most promising site. Eventually, you're going to have two high schools within about a mile of each other, which again, the common sense of that is leaning us towards, okay, let's look at Capilate High and Campbell High, look at building those out as much as we can while we can focus our attention on this. Bottom line, my office is committed to seeking funding for the classroom buildings projects of both Campbell High School and Capilate High School in the next biennium budget. And it's already been discussed, and this is just my own editorial, that you can see the challenge that we have with long-term planning, trying to plan 5-10 years out when we don't even know what our budget is going to be next year, particularly for CIP funding. It just makes it very difficult. And again, given all the restrictions of those other sites, we are again leaning into looking at this as a long-term solution. That outlines kind of what we've done so far. I'll open it up to questions.
Any questions for Dan?
Thanks, Dan. So given the plans that you have for the build out of additional classroom capacity in Campbell, and you look at the velocity of the population growth and enrollment growth, would you conceivably be able to keep up with the velocity, I guess, given the plans that you have? If you're limited to what you got in Campbell, and you don't get funds to increase your capacity in Capilate, I don't know that you're going to do that.
I would agree. I mean, we would need to get the funding to be able to build out Capilate High. That funding would actually be, again, our look at it is it's going in for an ask for a new high school as opposed to a new building right now. Seems to be much more.
Like you said, you got the land in Capilate, so you can build out more. Capacity-wise, how many classrooms could you build out in Capilate, or the existing Capilate?
Maybe one of my planners here. This is 10,000.
That project hasn't been scoped yet. The discussions have been 15 to 20 on, the project hasn't been scoped yet. It's a tentative project, but the hope is we would get 15 or 20 classrooms there as well. And then it would provide us capacity for the growth that you're talking about in the next 5, 6, 7 years. And by that time, we should be able to understand what's really going on with the whole field and the infrastructure and the cost, and maybe be able to activate that site sooner, and then build the high school there.
Maggie and then Don.
This is not really a question, it's just a comment, but when you start talking about over 3,000 kids in one high school, that's really a frightening thought to me. Having been a teacher in a high school that was fairly small and a principal of a 1,000-sized middle school, 3,000 kids is really hard when we're all talking about looking at the needs of kids, and kids get lost. The more kids you have on a campus, they get lost. I can kind of go okay for interim, but even when you talk about the new high school could go up to 3,200, I just shudder, because that to me it's not in the best interest of individual kids to have such large high schools. 2,000 is hard. Ask any of them at the schools with the 2,000, but to go to just plan on having 3,000 and over 3,000 is really disheartening to me. And I understand where you're coming from, but I just have to say that I can't abide that thought.
Thank you, Maggie. Don?
Then, as you know, one of the greatest costs is the off-sites, and it's 40% of the cost of the vertical, especially on some of this location, with the idea of our spot. So the idea of working with West Oahu seems to be a productive idea, since the off-sites are there and the state's already paid for them. So to me, one thought, as I understand it, one of the strategies is to have a teacher educational curriculum that's robust and be kind of a centerpiece in their overall strategy, especially. That would also be ideal because they would train local kids to go to their classrooms. So the idea of having a charter school at that location would be something that I would hope to encourage as one of the ideas when we go and join the legislature with the university system. We talk about the total education package of West Oahu, training teachers, having a real school on site. It would be an R&D school. Seems to be a path of less resistance from a site standpoint, and more strategic as a interim / more effective. Is that what you and Kathy were talking to James about?
Yes, sir, along those lines, looking at those kind of options, but again, your points are well taken.
Well, yeah, I think putting something together that the board could look at and encourage, and having some sort of strategic dialogue, either with the regents or the governor or what have you, talk about how West Oahu, we just need to me, we'll always do these things solo. You've already got a strategic partner there. So what do they need that we can give? What can they give to us? What we both find a win-win situation within that community. And in the charter school movement, there's opportunities for charter. So, secondly, the 30 acres behind the Clark Center. So our priority is the middle school is more a bigger need than a high school.
One of the, I think I maybe encouraged you before on this, but one of our ideas was potentially, if we did build it up even as a middle school for the long term, being a middle school, using it to actually house high schoolers in their since we're far enough down the road, building that one again, we still need the money to build it, but that is certainly one of the options that we look at.
But the good thing about that site is that quite a bit of off-site is there.
It is.
Et cetera, so your cost of the legislature to build that school out. Whatever we build, there's going to be a heck of a lot better, but they're dealing with the capital right now. So to me, that's a less expensive proposition, more less time. And greater need right now is probably the upper grades. It would take some pressure off the camp. Possible.
The East Copley Middle School is currently being designed. We asked for funding in this last biennium for that school in the hopes that it would allow us to kind of Rubik's Cube to get stuff to work out. When that funding didn't present, we started having to consider what do we do in the more near term to help those folks out. So we met with the CAS out there and all the principals, and we talked through these different strategies, which include putting this other classroom in Copley High School. We're still pushing our next budget for the middle school. And then as to the high school, it originally would be, the one in Ho'opili is hopefully would be 1,600 students. But what we've learned in the past is oftentimes we need to master plan just in the inevitable case that something else happens. If we can stagger this thing correctly, give us time to really think about that one high school, and maybe there will be a second high school out there in one of these other sites. But we were being pushed by the sense that this enrollment was really bouncing up its capacity. And that's why we had originally started talking with DLNR about that site, because it was the most available. But then the budget shifted everything, and we said, okay, now we have a little bit, because of the budget, we have a little more time to think this through a little bit more deeply.
But what I'm hearing you say, Dan, is that if we build that quote middle school, we design it in such a way, I think cost-wise, that would be reasonable. Because the whole Peely is a long way off of getting the offsites up to that piece of dirt. And the DLNR, there is no offsites for the most part, right? So the offsites are there and the middle school stuff. And we designed it in such a way that we could take pressure as a high school temporarily until those other things get funded. Is that what you're going to say?
You could pick up some of the upper level grades is what the intent is. And we've been talking with the board about the whole deal because theirs is going to be predicated on what the economy does in terms of the build out. But we have discussed the cost and maybe partnering with part of that infrastructure to get it up to hold. Worst case, they said we might be able to take that site in 8 years, which we think would align itself with the funding that we would ask for. So we're working that, but we wanted to make sure we were serving that community with these other sort of interim things that met the level of funding that we were seeing in this administration. So
I just have one more question, sir. When and if the rail gets finished, obviously that's the first station there. Doesn't that give us, I mean, because if I look at the overall gross numbers of total kids on Oahu, the number of students isn't growing. The population is pretty flat. So we're building all these new schools, which basically means we've got empty classrooms someplace, and most of us in urban core. So if we have a strategy of having some of those kids, parents work at home, grandparents at home, et cetera, have an efficient way to get from their home to the school and wherever.
Well, the location of the land for the high school is obviously a great location, just a few blocks away from our rail station. So that is an idea as far as.
And that's first to get to the stadium, is supposed to open at the end of 18. I'm saying, when we look at also the idea of taking some of the pressure off by potentially having kids specifically go to school in the urban core.
Jim?
Thank you. I'm going to go a little different direction from Mr. Warner. I think, well, no, it's not. When I look at your numbers for your 5-year projection, the problem is, Campbell, it's not Kapolei High School. If you build the idea of building a building at Kapolei High School should just be to take care of Kapolei High School's needs, period. This is my opinion. You build that one building, it'll take care of you for the next 5 or 6 years. And then you play golf. Do you play golf?
Not well.
You should, well, here's why I bring it up. My colleagues know that I do, and I'm avid, and so I get to a lot of golf courses. But the interesting thing about it is you play at Barbers Point, you play at Coral Creek, you play at White Prince. Guess what's happening around all of those golf courses? used to be scrubland, now it's houses. Guess what? They're not building those for people my age. They're building those for people who are gonna have kids. Probably already do have kids. And where is that? See, I think it's great if you have a developer who'll give you a place for a high school, but it's in the wrong place, in my opinion. But your problem isn't Kapolei, your problem is Eva Beach, it's Campbell. And if you look at, you drive down Kapolei, whatever, Qualified Parkway, whatever that parkway is, it goes to Kapolei Parkway, past the Croc Center, and the other golf course that has houses around it now that never did is Eva Villages, which is right there around that corner. We're really talking about a school closer to wherever Mackay Middle School is. That would be the ideal spot. I mean, if you just talking geography, because look, you're going to take Campbell High School, 3,500, call it 3,600, split it in half, you got two schools of 1,800. You're going to have some excess capacity at the existing Campbell High School, but you know that can easily be filled, as Don said. Maybe a charter school could use a building by that time. But really, West Oahu, whole feeling, as advantageous as they may be in terms of ease of getting something done, they're not in the right place. You got to take care of Campbell. And we're talking long term. Ledge ain't going to do anything right now anyway. So I mean, you got time to look at that. And I would look at trading off land to get a more appropriate place in Eva Beach. Because really, go play golf. That's where they're building the houses. They're not building as many in Kapolei. And you got room in Kapolei, and you put another building in Kapolei, will be fine. Now, the second thing is, to amplify on Member Cox. It's not, I mean, I highly value her professional assessment, but her professional assessment is backed up by research. I believe it's Education Commission of States. You know, we always, all of us, I've done it over the years, talk about class size. But the research shows that in terms of size, the thing that affects academic achievement the most is school size. And Hawaii's school sizes are out the window already. They're ridiculously high. We have huge elementary schools. And now we're talking about planning purposes, building a mega high school and say, well, 1,600 to start, but we're going to throw every other kid that we get in the next 5 years in that school and we'll get it up to 3,000. And it's not best educational. You need to build more small schools. So again, that would advocate for splitting Campbell in half, keeping both halves under 2,000. So I hope you just take that under advisement. We're not going to decide it today, and I might not be here when final decisions are made, but I hope my board members, my colleagues will be assertive about this. And the expeditious way isn't necessarily the best way. And really, go play golf, go on, go drive around those golf courses, and you will see that's where the development is. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just add a little more to the soapbox. As you're talking about these things, and you throw out about a middle school, and you can throw high school kids in or whatever, you know, middle level education is one of the most important ones because it's got such a, well, it's not the most important, but it's got such huge emotional problems. And I don't hear a lot of, you know, I mean, you can't just talk about a high school and dump some kids into a middle school or take away, you know, because some of our middle schools are huge. So we really need to take a look at, as my colleague says, the size of schools all over the place as we're doing this planning. But yeah, the high schools are so big right now that that's a big thing. But look at middle schools, because the middle schools have so many problems with just that age that you don't want those expanding, and some of them are really big now. So I'll get off my soapbox now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to, I agree with everything that Ms. Cox and Mr. Williams stated, but I want to just kind of toss this out. I graduated from a high school that had about 2,300 students for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, 3 grades. I had over 800 students in my class, okay? Now, for someone that loved sports, but could not play basketball because only 15 players would be playing basketball. Your high school experience in a mega school, you're not getting the full experience as you would if your high school, like now, Hilo has Waikia High School, Hilo High School, and Kiao High School. The advantages of having many more kids in our community participating in social activities, sports activities, is multiplied by 3. You're going to have a mega school. The basketball team is only going to have 15 players on the men's and 15 players on the women's team. Your baseball team is only going to have so many players. Your swimming team is going to have only so many swimmers. You're really affecting. So this idea of an intermediate school as a holdover for a temporary high school, horrible idea. Worst idea I've heard so far. Because you're not giving the students in that school a high school experience. They're going to be in a temporary high school environment. Horrible idea. If they had a choice between going to a crowded big school or a small with the full array of a high school experience or a temporary school, they're going to choose going to the high school that's overcrowded because they want to have the high school experience. They don't want to have a temporary experience in a smaller school. But, and the last thing I want to say, Mr. Carlson, you got to plan long-term as to what's in the best interest of the community and the students. The money is a separate issue. If you're going to plan based on how much money you're going to be available, then you're not planning. So to me, you got to plan for what's optimum, and in the legislature, they're going to make their political decisions in terms of allocating what the community believes needs to be allocated. That's a different issue. But and I think you guys got to go back to the drawing board, to be frank. So thank you very much. Anyway, but it's good that you guys came. We can have this discussion. Okay, moving on. Recommendations for action. The only action item we have is action on several board policies. You should all have a copy of the memorandum in your meeting material, which provides the policy order permitted interaction group recommendations in each of the policies. The department also has comments on board policy 400.3, implementation of board education policy. I would like to call on Tammy Chung. Is she here? Okay. Is anyone going to present for her? If not, we can just, the chair will entertain a motion to adopt the policies as proposed. Is there a second? Move my second. Any discussion? Okay.
So are we looking at all of the
All
policies?
three.
Okay, so one of the changes that the DOE is recommending is the extension from going from 45 days to 90 days to adopt a new board policy. I just want to say in my experience with the policy-making world that I do think it is reasonable to do 90 days. In my experience, I think that gives enough time for the department to give their feedback, to go out and get feedback on policies. And I agree with that one line too in terms of extending it with approval of relevant board committee and committee chairs. And so just wanted to speak from my experience that I support that recommendation.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Motion is carried. Chair, there's no other agendized business, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So,
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
aye.
Opposed say nay. Motion is carried. We now stand adjourned. Our next committee meeting is at 2 o'clock. 2:30. So if you're parked in the shopping center, you're only supposed to have